Um, I was here this morning as Blinken gave his statement. Also, there was Amagro, who is head of the OAS, giving his speech. The people that you hear in the background are basically protesters. There are not that many of them here, all things being equal, but nevertheless, they're here nonetheless. Um, a few thoughts on this. Blinken gave a statement in regards to integration, and they just gave this front as if we're together, we're united, we're the Americas, etc. But the glaring reality is that the fact that Cuba, Venezuela, and what was the last one? Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua was not invited. Then you ended up with a scenario where many of the other countries decided, well, it is not a summit of the Americas if all of the countries from the Americas are not necessarily invited to the summit. Understand, the United States is one country of many other countries that are supposedly here. And as one country, how does that one country make a determination that the other country should go because it doesn't like their governments? Obrador, president of Mexico, has been very strong. AMLO put out a statement basically saying this is the summit of America's friends. This is not the same thing as the summit of America's. And if that is the case, they don't want to come. Bolivia, Honduras also decided not to sit there and to stay, even if they might have a lower republic. Here's the thing, and I'm not going to keep this here long. I was thinking about this morning, and it really is astonishing how Biden fails at whatever he puts his hands on. You decide to have an American summit. Fair enough, Summit of Americas. You decided to host it in the United States. Yeah, fair enough. You then decide, of your own, hubris and thinking of things, that you don't want to invite Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Honduras. Now, keep in mind, one of the stated objectives of this was supposed to be like healthcare and integration and everything else, whereas Cuba has done amazingly on the issue of COVID. Yes, as many people dead. Also, this idea that we don't like dictators. Since when? We've installed dictators in South America, not to mention we're friends with Saudi Arabia. Zero issue on that particular issue, but all of a sudden, there's this new criteria in regards to the certain people who want to come and don't come. Here's the catch, and here's the rub. I've often said that you don't take a position or you don't take an act that your position can't accommodate. Meaning, you don't make moves and you don't make decisions if you can't necessarily deal with the real physical matter reality of those positions. And if the cost in taking those positions is too high, then you shouldn't do it. Now, this requires a certain degree of honest assessment of your own capabilities, and that is not something that we're necessarily engaged in all that much. All things being equal, they decided you don't want those countries to come. All right, what is the consequence? Well, then you get another bunch of countries that say you don't want to come. So Biden in his head believed we can decide not to invite those countries. And we can use our own soft power in order to get the other countries to show up. So instead of this event being a source of American power and showing how America can bring the community together to ostracize other nations that it doesn't particularly like. Mind you, they were trying to get oil from Maduro just last month after trying to murder the guy last year. Whatever. The reality of it is that if you look up Summit for Americas, if you just put it in typing, what comes up? The only thing that comes up is weakness, an exponential show of weakness. The only thing that people are talking about the summit, they're not talking about the substance. They're not talking about, okay, what they're talking about is U.S. snubbed by these other nations. These other nations decide not to come. Here's why these other nations decide not to come. Meaning, all of the reporting, especially on the first page, is basically how Biden wasn't able to get the other nations to show up. How a Mexican president decided not to show up. Here are the comments from the Mexican president. Here are the comments from the other presidents. Meaning, you're not able to really get what he wanted the focus to be on, which was all things being equal, substance, and the show of American strength and show of that America has the ability to kind of bring these other nations along, even if it takes soft power to do it. That's not what it is. So this show of strength ended up being an exponential show of weakness, and an inability to even get South American nations, who are supposed to be the background of the United States, wasn't able to get them to show up. It's very weird when you think about it. My point is, you didn't have to take that act. You could have looked at this and said to yourself, okay, what if we can't get these guys to show up? Is it worse in regards to the perspective of things if we make a choice and then we can't physically put through that choice? Meaning, we're making a choice and we can't necessarily sustain the choice because we look worse in the way that it comes out. So instead of him basically accepting, okay, if we disinvite those countries, other countries aren't going to come, fair enough, then we're going to invite those countries, and we don't want to look weak by basically trying to take a position that we can't accommodate. That's the point that I'm making here. You didn't have to do that. You could have relented on that and said, it looks worse for us to disinvite these guys and have a bunch of other countries to not show up. So we are going to invite them and just deal with that reality of it. It's as if there's a level of hubris, there's a level of an inability to understand your own strength and capability in a world that is basically and fundamentally changing. It just seems that we are missing the boat on this stuff. One act after the next, we seem to continuously hit our head on this idea of your image of yourself is not represented in the capabilities that you have at your disposal to affect the world in a way that you want to affect the world. And there's an honest question of, look, if you're trying to bring these guys together and you're looking out for the betterment of everybody, is it possible that the betterment of everybody is not just what is in the U.S. interest? Meaning, it may be very well possible, and I would go so far as to say likely, that what is in the specific interest of the U.S. is not necessarily indicative of what is in the best interest for peace, security, economic prosperity, etc., in the context of the South America thing. This is a summit of the American friends. And as such, this is not the summit of the Americas because many of those countries that represent Americas aren't here. And again, this is somewhat of a show of weakness. It didn't need to be this way. Biden didn't need to take the position of a maximalist position of the countries he didn't want to add. Not to mention, it is comically ridiculous, the hypocrisy associated with the countries that he basically chose that he didn't want to come. So that's the topic of the agenda. That's what everyone is talking about. Not the substance, not what these guys are doing, not what these guys are trying to do. They may put a blurb on the side about, okay, they're just trying to do this. The reality of it is, what they are talking about is how this is a fiasco. It's astonishing. Utterly astonishing. And again, here's another situation that did not have to exist at all. With a little forethought incompetence, you could have just invited Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba and just allowed those delegations. Look, if you need to take one opportunity after the next to browbeat them here, fair enough, you do that. If you want to look bad at them and to tweet your app, do that. But it looks worse to not invite them and have many countries, prominent countries in the South, decide to not show up in unity of the countries that you were literally trying to ostracize. Look, whether it's an economic war, whether it's provoking the war with Ukraine, whether it's the failure of getting those troops out of Afghanistan without it looking just comically collapsing, whether it's the COVID thing where you have all of those people died of COVID, whether it's the levels of inflation and gas, whatever it is, it seems that whatever he puts his hands on, it turns to basically ash. It turns into a fiasco. And like I said, I have never seen, you guys know how I feel about Trump. I've never seen a president this inept, this incompetent, this full of mendacity in the way that he would basically lie. And beyond that point, even this out to lunch in regards to his own appraisal of his self-importance and his capability. I've never seen anything like it. There needs to be an honest assessment of what you can do and what you can't do. And in one case after the next, that honest assessment doesn't seem to be there. And they seem to basically be using ideology in the place of dealing with the real terms of reality. Well, fair enough. Reality doesn't care about your ideology. And all things being equal, oftentimes people's ideology hits their head on the rock of reality. And that is basically what is taking place here. That is what's taking place in Ukraine. That is taking place over COVID. Pick one issue. It is your perceptions, your ideology, and the things that you want in the grandiose ideas of yourself. Hitting its head, falling to the ground, and bleeding, where everybody gets hit, on the rock of reality. This is where we are. This is a fiasco. Whatever comes out of it, that's going to be one thing, and I will be reporting that also. But my first impression today, at least the strongest one, is, oh my God, how did you F this up like this? And all things being equal, there are things that you have to do in life that you don't necessarily want to do, but you do it because you don't want to deal with the consequences of those actions. Meaning, there's all sorts of things that I have to. I was in a sauna for 2 hours last night. Why? Got to pay for my values. I think of it in the way Jinsaki. Meaning, if I'm going to take a trip like this, there are going to be times where I need to level the amount of fluid that I'm producing and everything else. And the way of doing it is a sauna. So sitting an hour, 2 hours in a sauna, no, it's not necessarily the most comfortable. Do I mind it? Not so much. I actually like it. But it's something that you have to do in order to accommodate the other things that you want to do. You got to pay for your values. That's not just, paying for gas because the gas price went up for Ukraine. That's everything across the board as a basis of operation. That's why I keep saying it, that Jen Psaki said it. I'm making the point here that there are plenty of things that people do that they don't necessarily want to do, but they have to do because the consequences and the ramifications of not doing those things are greater. It doesn't quite seem that the Biden administration understands that. Meaning, you invite Nicaragua, you invite Cuba, you invite Venezuela, not because you love those countries, not because you believe that the governments are great or anything else. You do it because not doing it looks worse, and the consequences of not doing it look worse. All right. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I hope this video came out okay sound-wise. I can't get out of the wind. It's just kind of where we are. I'm going to a dinner that these guys are doing later on. So I will talk to you guys later. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks.